Alright, back at you. Worldwide movement, peace, love, respect, Big King Sadiq. Hollering at you one more again. And this is another beautiful day in the Steel City, right? It's January, so we expect it to be cold, but it's not quite as cold as I've certainly seen it in this city, right? And I'm sure many of you have as well. So, very interesting subject that we're going to try and cover here. We're going to be talking about telekinesis and quantum mechanics, right? So let's get started, and basically what I'm going to try and be doing here is talking about the relationship between the two, right? We'll start with quantum mechanics. So that is a scientific field of study that up until recent years a lot of folks had gone back and forth about in terms of its acceptance in the mainstream, and still is not completely accepted within mainstream science. But there are certain aspects of quantum mechanics that just about every mainstream scientist is generally forced to acknowledge, right? So I say that to say that this is while hard fought, a legitimized field of science. And really just looking into it, you can judge that for yourself, right? You don't need anyone else to tell you what is legitimate and what is not. Okay, so quantum mechanics, just to give a very brief and watered down explanation of this, is the study of particles, right? The particles that make up all the things in our existence. And when we talk about particles, we're talking about the particles of a thing down to its atomic and even subatomic levels, right? Okay. And quantum mechanics is essentially the study of the forces at play in between that space that let's say, I'm trying to stay away from a certain term, but let's say the space in between those particles, right? The forces that are at play in the space in between those particles, and how that forms a relationship between those particles, right? So I guess we'll start with talking about, well, quickly, just to identify a couple of those forces, right? We're talking about things we can commonly recognize, like gravity, centrifugal force, even inertia has to be recognized. You know, despite the fact that inertia describes being at rest, we know that nothing is actually completely at rest because everything has a vibratory nature, right? So that plays in a very interesting way with inertia. But there are very recognizable forces at play. But what has been uncovered in recent times, I'll say some of which in recent decades, but a lot of which has been uncovered more recently, right? In recent years, is the very measurable way that the human biosphere can impact what is known as the quantum field. So, just to review again quickly, the quantum field is that energetic field that exists between particles, right? And quantum mechanics is the study of those forces at play within that energetic field and how that forms a relationship between particles. All right, so one of the things that has recently been uncovered as a force that is incredibly impactful and measurable is the impact of the human biosphere on the quantum field, right? When we talk about the human biosphere, we're talking about the energetic field that is emitted by our bodies, right? Naturally. We're talking about the electromagnetic field that our bodies generate all the time, right? And that radiates outwardly from our body, most directly from our heart, right? Which isn't all that difficult to grasp, there being a lot of energetic things at play with your heart because you have blood constantly pumping through your heart. We know that there's iron in blood, the makings of a generator right there, right? So again, I'm oversimplifying all this to go through it. So understanding a little bit about what our biosphere is, there have been some very interesting experiments that have yielded some very profound results, right, and outcomes that show measurably how our biosphere impacts the quantum field. So, there's a doctor, I think I'm saying it correctly. If I'm not, please excuse me, sir. Dr. Masaru Emoto, who conducted some very interesting experiments with water, right? And the impact that our biosphere has energetically on particles of water. All right, so essentially he took a couple of flasks filled with water, both completely the same, no difference in the two flasks, right? And in one flask had an individual speak into the flask statements that were very negative, harmful, or low vibrational, right? You know, I hate you, you're so ugly, etc., etc., etc. And in the flask, opposite of that, very positive or high vibrational frequency statements. You know, I love you, you're fantastic, you're so wonderful, etc. And then flash froze these flasks, right, to study the ice formations. And upon doing so, noticed very profound differences in the ice, right? This ice, the ice test itself, of course, has been repeated, excuse me, over and over and over again, right? And all the requisites of a properly conducted scientific experiment, of course, were observed. So, the conclusion showed the outcome that the ice that had the high vibrational frequency statement spewed into it showed very beautiful crystalline structures that look like elaborate snowflakes, right? Very beautiful geographic patterns, very geometrically intricate, right, patterns. And in the structures that, or rather the flask that had the low vibrational frequency statements spewed into it, it was noticed that there were first of all, the ice itself was very murky, right, in appearance. Had a lot of very sharp and jagged, very disorganized and random crystalline structures within it, and geometric, patterns, right? And with that, you see the very profound impact of just spewing those words directly into that water. And I thought that was a very profound and impactful discovery, or rather recording of those outcomes utilizing the scientific process. Now, what's beautiful is that there's been a lot of other different ways that this test has been repeated. We've also seen similar experiments conducted utilizing flowers, right? And the same sorts of statements being spoke into different plants, and what impact that has had, right? And we've seen that in the positively induced plants, right, or the plants that received high vibrational frequency stimuli, that those plants flourished, right, blossoming beautiful flowers, etc. And the opposite with the plants that had received the negative or low vibrational frequency stimuli, those plants often wilted and died, right? That's deep. that's very profound. So we see again just a couple of different experiments that illustrate the very measurable impact of the human biosphere on the quantum field, or rather on particles of existence. And there are a lot of other very interesting experiments, like I think, is it the split screen experiment or something like that, that's done utilizing light, showing how observation impacts reality, or how something exists, right? Whether or not it's observed. A bevy of experiments that you can look on your own and see that show the very profound and measurable impact of the human biosphere on particles of existence and on the quantum field itself. So, now that we understand that, let's transfer that over to the possible ramifications that could have in the study of the potential for telekinesis, right? And, you know, this should be really interesting. Excuse me. This should be really interesting to those individuals who, you know, might aspire to acquire some of the techniques and abilities of the ascended masters throughout history, right? Who have demonstrated human beings having the ability to perform what we commonly view as miraculous or certainly strange abilities. And I'm trying to stay away from the word powers, right? Because I certainly don't look at it as any sort of a fictitious superpowers, as much as unlocking human ability, right? And telekinesis certainly is probably the one that has throughout history had more or had the most experiments done, valid scientific experiments that show human ability along the lines of telekinesis. And now I would say that since we understand how our biosphere has a very measurable impact on the quantum field, right? Then it only stands to reason that our biosphere can potentially have a very measurable impact on the forces at play within the biosphere, right? And if that's the case, then certainly, and one of those, the probably the most important force at play within the biosphere, or excuse me, the quantum field that I didn't mention earlier, is magnetism, right? So this ties in greatly with our biosphere, understanding that it is of an electromagnetic nature, right? So again, it only stands to reason that our biosphere that we know is electromagnetic in nature and has measurably been shown to impact particles of existence and to impact the quantum field itself, it again makes sense that we can have a measurable impact through our biosphere on the forces at play within the quantum field, right? And let's just go no further than magnetism, right? Since we are actively emitting an electromagnetic field, to me, it stands to reason that that electromagnetic field can interact with, impact, and potentially manipulate magnetism as it exists and is at play within the quantum field, right? And any particle within a measurable area of the quantum field. So now we're talking about not just impacting, but actually manipulating a specific force within the quantum field. So if we are able to do that potentially, doesn't it stand to reason that we could potentially impact any material, right? Or any particle? And certainly particles would form any material that is in existence within the quantum field, or that specific area or range of the quantum field that we are at that particular time impacting, right? Or in cohesion with our biosphere. Okay, so if we're utilizing our biosphere to manipulate electromagnetism within the quantum field, then I'm stating it's very possible for us to utilize that manipulation to manipulate matter within the quantum field. So I think this is a little bit of a different approach than what had previously been given to telekinesis, because I think previously a lot of individuals approached it from the standpoint of manipulating something with your mind, right? Whereas in this particular scientific attempt at looking at the possibility of us establishing and mastering telekinesis, right, through very valid and scientific means, that we're focusing more so on the control and manipulation of our body's natural electromagnetic field known as our biosphere, and how that can interact with electromagnetism that is at play within the quantum field. And any matter that is existent within that particular area of the quantum field that we are impacting or manipulating. Right. So I think that's a very interesting take on it. One that you certainly can do your own free thinking research into, and something that you can ponder and give a little thought to as we move forward and uncover more and more and learn more and more about ourselves, right? And utilize science as a discipline and a tool to help us do that, rather than something that is a hindrance, right? Or some sort of an obstacle that is keeping us from understanding more about ourselves. Let's flip that and use science as a very effective and potent tool to learn more and more about ourselves. Remember, likely the most powerful words ever spoken: know thyself. All right, Big King Sadiq, one more look at the beautiful Steel City. All seems to be peaceful. We got a few folks in commute, right? And everything's fine. So everybody hang in there still. In 2020, a lot of folks, I think, got a little disappointed at some things that might have been predicted that didn't come out the way folks were looking for them to at the time. But there's beautiful things ahead, right? Let's just keep moving forward and using all of our faculties to uncover them, right? All right. Thank you all. I love you all. One more again, worldwide movement. Peace, love, respect. Big King Sadiq, I'm out.